Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Should Pre-Sales Train Sales? Positives and Potential Pitfalls with Tony Francetic. My name is Robin Mercado, and I am an inside sales development representative at Consensus, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. DEMOFEST is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn a little bit more at goconsensus.com, or you can view the automated micro demo at the link in the Docs tab to the right of your screen. Consensus is very proud to provide this event for free to all attendees. However, we would like to invite each of you to donate to our company's humanitarian organizations if you'd like to. You can learn a little bit more about this and donate by visiting the DemoFest Gives Back booth in our virtual expo hall in the Booths tab, or at the link in the Docs tab in the right of your screen. We also invite you to join us in our DemoFest community on Discord. Our community is where you can connect with speakers, get exclusive access to content and events, and really where the conversation will continue long after the DemoFest event has ended. You can join that community at the Docs tab on the right as well. And we also encourage you to participate in today's session. So on the right of your console, you'll see a few ways to engage with us throughout the session. The chat function will allow you to engage with us as well as other attendees. And throughout the session, you may see a few polls. We encourage you to participate as your feedback is super important to us. And our speaker, of course, will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session. But we encourage you to ask questions at any time through the Q&A box on the right. If you see a question that's already been asked in the Q&A box that you would like answered yourself, you can just upvote it, and then we can prioritize it at the end when we go to answer. If at any time you're having any technical difficulties, you can head to the gear icon on the bottom of your screen. And there you'll see a help document that will really help you to troubleshoot common issues. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. Tony Francetic is the Senior Manager of Solutions Consulting with the Tax Professional Sales Department at Thomson Reuters. In this role, Tony oversees a team of 33 solutions consultants that provide web-based and live product demonstrations during the sales process. Additionally, his team includes product trainers and sales coaches. Tony started his career at Thomson Reuters, providing technical support to Thomson Reuters products, and then transitioned full-time as a technical trainer. He continues to train internally on presentation skills and crucial conversations. Tony holds a cyber defense degree from Baker College and an integrated leadership studies degree from Central Michigan University. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Robin. All right, let's get this here. And of course, the wonderful thing of transitioning slides. There we go. Hopefully got it. Okay, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join today's session. Should pre-sales train sales? And this is one of those scenarios that I thought was so funny. We were talking with John Cook on different topics and what we should go over. And he said, well, this one sounds provocative, so let's work on that one. So the idea of pre-sales involved in the sales training side of it is something that may or may not be hitting everybody. It's kind of a mixed bag of conversations I've had up to this point, but I am excited to spend the next quite an hour with everybody going through what we've experienced at Thomson Reuters in the tax professional division on positive experiences and then things to be aware of. So as Robin mentioned, I'm Senior Manager of Solution Consulting. We in the tax professional division, so we've got a couple segments that we support. But yeah, large team. It's an awesome setup of individuals that encompass not just the solutions consultants themselves, but also sales coaches and product trainer, which is an interesting dynamic. So I'll get to a little bit of that with the history of the division. But for me, I will say that I'm an absolute fan of the pre-sales industry since I transitioned over into it. Like many of the other speakers have said today, it's the best job. Pre-sales is the space where we get to spend time doing things and helping others. And I think really, if I look to many of the speakers that have been on stage today or going to be on stage tomorrow, I've connected with them individually, and I wouldn't be where I am without their support. So it is an absolutely fantastic industry to be a part of. So count yourself blessed if you're in there, and if you're looking to transition into the industry, it is really the best place to be. I do have a background in journalism, which is an odd start to things, but it does parallel really well into how pre-sales functions, right? We do a lot of discovery. We like to ask the right questions. That's one of those things that it's a good way to, I've used some background to parallel into where we are. It's 10 years I crossed the mark at TR, and the best thing that I can say, and we are a consensus customer as well, we implemented in 2019. And I can recall vividly of some of my team being a little nervous that we were going to, automate their jobs away. But over the time from when we implemented to now, we've actually grown the team from 8, supporting 200 and some sales reps at the time across those couple divisions, to a team of 33 that encompasses then the coaches and the trainer as well. So great growth of the size of the pre-sales organization alongside consensus. And we do really attest a lot to the benefits that the platform offers us. So thanks to all the consensus folks. They're all great partners, and we love to be a part of this. And I personally happy to be able to give back a little bit and spend some time going through my experiences with our sales training piece. So what we'll go through today, like I said, I'll give a little bit of the history of how this has progressed over time and how we've kind of moved our way into this motion of training the sales organization. We've talked about the benefits, where we've seen value in having pre-sales involved in that training motion, and then some of the challenges to be mindful of and things that we've experienced and grown through. Definitely have time for questions if there is anything that does come up. As Robin said, throw them in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that. There's the Q&A function too, but wherever we can get some insights there, happy to provide some time there to talk about the experience a little further. I did want to start though too, a little bit with the definitions piece. It's been mentioned on many occasions up to this part. We've got a lot of different titles in the pre-sales space: solutions consultants, sales engineers. We used to be sales infrastructure. That's back when I see Matt Towers is in here too. Fire up chips. Matt was one of the sales infrastructure squad back in the day. But in terms of like what this means from a definitional standpoint, how those enabling functions are labeled, I'll give you the details of what we do, because I'll refer to it in that format throughout the presentation. We do have a sales enablement team at Thomson Reuters. They've been transitioning their focus to be more on sales skills, as well as some of the process and sales methodology. The training piece of it, the sales training, has been product-led training. Now, you can talk about skills training, you can talk about process training, products and what have you. There's a whole bunch of different ways to think of it. What my team has been taking point on is product-specific level training, which then we'll talk about the benefits of a little bit. And then the coaching piece, and I'll talk about how this plays into the greater picture of how the team is made up. The thing that I really like to consider the pre-sales space, and our team specifically, goes back to something that Lori said in the keynote this morning about being influencers. So, we're able to position ourselves in a specific way, and I'll talk about our structure in a second here too. But if you could think about what do you wish you could influence your sales counterparts to do differently? Go ahead and throw some in the chat there. If there was anything you could have them just magically wave a wand and your sales counterparts would do differently, what would it be? Some furious typing going on. Better discovery. Ask more questions. You bet. Yeah. Qualifying questions. Get into the pain more frequently. Absolutely. Yeah. There's discovery again. So the thing that, and it's kind of where I figured everybody would kind of go to, right? Help us in discovery. Go down that path. Ask better questions. All those things are in line with what more involvement in the sales training aspect can offer. We were involved several years ago, kind of helping out a launch team, and we involved some of those pre-sales folks in as a product expert. But what happened was kind of an unintended consequence. When you bring those in and there's early like SDRs transitioning into an account executive role, they're a little bit more malleable at that stage. Well, if pre-sales is helping to influence and talk about those value propositions and solutions, they're going to naturally gravitate towards the things that they want sales to give them to set the demo up for success. So this has kind of led itself into now more this formalized training environment that we find ourselves in, simply because if you're going to have somebody that's going to train sales, why not create that training environment in such a way where it's going to benefit the sale, right? We're going to have better qualified deals that get to the pre-sales team, and the pre-sales team is going to move that forward and hopefully close more deals that way. Well, if we can push what we need upstream into the training process for sales, then everything gets better from there on out. So thank you guys for throwing that in the chat. I'll pose another question there in a minute, but that's really ideally where it's at. Like, you can have that level of influence in helping them do better discovery when we're positioning training from the lens of pre-sales. So I mentioned a brief bit of history. When I started on the team, and this is going to go back in the pre-sales space, 7 years, I believe. At the time, my old boss, who just got done doing a session here before us there, I sat in his office at one point and was trying to talk through, like, well, why are we struggling with this? What is going on? Because the demos that we got at that point were typically the harbor tours, right? Your overview demos, where maybe some of those questions were asked after we showed the basics, and then we kind of got something that was a nugget of need, right? That needs analysis that we all want to gravitate toward when we're giving a presentation. But it didn't come until the end of that demo. So it resulted in scheduling subsequent demos to then get to that heart and really cater the message to what clients needed and connect that to the value and the solution. And it was funny because when I challenged the idea, I'm like, man, we can't get these reps to give us what we need out of it. And it's like, well, they were never expected to have that level of depth in the programs. They were taught, you don't need to know what to sell it, just put them in a demo. And I know many of us in the space have seen things shift over the last few years, and my team included. There's been leaps and bounds from what it used to be, but there's an air of that I think has kind of kept along over years. And what we wanted to do was start to change that process to the better, so that the pre-sales team would have more qualified demos hitting their calendars. They would have better close rates. We have more revenue influence, and everything is a positive step forward. So then we got involved into that preseason space. Now, I mentioned we're in the tax and accounting industry. Our preseason space runs from like January to April, where April 15th is the tax deadline in the US. So we did lots of things during that point. We looked at our data and rolled it over for the new year. We had, content creation for our presentations. We revised all, what was up from a product transition standpoint, new UIs, what have you, internal training. And then we started to play a little bit more in this pre-season training house, and tried to target that information more on the workflow, more on the discovery, and things started to go where there were some positive responses. We gave them more bite-sized pieces instead of just, drinking from a fire hose. Well, then we were lucky enough to transition things over to a different structure. So when I first started, we were under the professional services, like training consulting division. Then we moved under the sales division. And then more recently, the last couple of years, we moved out of the sales division and it's a go-to-market org, but it runs in tandem with the other divisions. So while we still primarily support the sales division by way of demos and training and coaching, we're in parallel to them, as well as marketing and product marketing and products. So it positions us really, truly as that influencer that Lori mentioned this morning. So I really like where this fits, because at that point we absorbed then the product trainer and the coaches. And it's an interesting piece. And I say synergy here, that's tongue in cheek. Our users conference every year is called Synergy. So I always love to throw out there the chance, and it's, anybody that's from Thomson Reuters have kind of grown at the pun, but the synergy that exists between solutions consultants and a sales coach and a trainer is really, really targeted. So what we see is the number of solutions consultants having these conversations with sales reps, we get to identify where the shortcomings are. So we'll see if they're challenged with connecting value to a solution, if they understand the workflow or the industry. Maybe they transition from an SDR and they don't have that depth of knowledge yet, and they just don't know what to ask. So we can identify what those trends are going to look like. And because of that, then we can kick it over to the coaches. And we've got coaches aligned to different motions, but then they can do more one-on-one deep dives with those sales reps to understand, is it a training concern? Is it something where they just didn't connect the dots? Do they need some more handholding and one-on-one help because they learn differently than others? Because that's a reality too. And the trends that then the coaches identify can feed over into the product training. And now we start the cycle back over again. We train the entire sales division. We understand where the shortcomings are. We cook the coaches in, and then we bring that back full circle to the training and get it changed over year. So it has resulted in this really nice synergy of how these folks work together to then better the outcome of the sales division. And then the future state, there are some things in motion we have today, and where I think we continue to go down is more certifications. So a graded certification we took on, and that's something that we've got one under our belt. We've got 3 more planned for the rest of this year. And then formalizing a little bit more of that process too, to really embed that and get reinforcement from the sales leadership team. So I'm excited to see the things that have gone down so far. I'm super excited to have my coaches and my product trainers there. I know several around on the call listening here. So thank you guys for all you do, and the solution consultants who are able to feed all this stuff back and forth. It's an awesome setup, what we've been able to experience. So I am curious too, as far as those that are on the call, how many are involved in some level of pre-sales led training for the sales division? If you have an idea, go ahead and throw in the chat if there's anything that you're involved in, even if it's product specific things, if it's going to be process related, anybody that's standing apart. Well, Peter, of course, that makes sense. Few people. Okay, technical onboarding. Yeah, that's another area where we've got an onboarding team. We're trying to blend in with them too. Awesome. Okay, that's really helpful. Wanted to make sure that we did hit the mark. There are some folks that are in this space, and it is not it's not unheard of at this point, but absolutely is. I think it's an area that we can have that extended level of influence into those enabling functions. It may be a sales enablement team that owns that training, but if you talk about the subject matter experts and how you're going to define those in an organization, your pre-sales teams, look at what they have to do. And I always give the elevator pitch of what I feel pre-sales really is. We blend together all these different divisions. To do the job of a pre-sales really, really well, you've got to know the marketing strategy and messaging to be consistent with what your prospects may be finding out on the web. You've got to have the product roadmaps, and you've got to know where it's going for vision setting in the future. You've got to know the industry that you support. You got to know what's going on in the market. You have to know, obviously, your own solutions. You have to know the competitor landscape as well. And then you blend in the sales acumen and the presentation skills, and it creates this type of person, right? We have this role in an organization that can influence all those areas, because the amount of data that we garner to do the job well, coupled with what we gather from those interactions with customers, really positions us as, in my opinion, the solution to connecting the dots in the sales training world. So that parallels a little bit into where I see the benefits. So, right, we bring all that together. Solutions consultants bring all those areas together, that experiential knowledge of what we do, leveraging that information to help position for sales. So I mentioned earlier, right, what could we wish we could do better? Most everybody said, how do we get better discovery on it? Well, sales, depending on what it is, and I will say that Thomson Reuters, we've got a pretty hefty product bag. So it's a wide bag. There's a lot of solutions. They're technical solutions. And I think the expectation that any one of the sales reps can have all of those solutions to a level of depth to demo and qualify themselves, it's not realistic. So the challenge is finding the balance of what information they need to qualify it and set up the demo for the highest propensity for success. And if you're going to take the interactions that the pre-sales team has with customers to understand what they like, what they don't like, to know the marketing, to know all those things, well, baking that into the sales training, the product level training, and distilling it down in a way where it's, again, targeted and specific. Sales reps are going to need things simplified and fast, right? They have a terribly busy job. They've got to do prospecting, they got to do closing, they got to do rapport building, like all these things that come into the sales process. Well, if we're going to build out the 15-question survey on what they need to do to get a demo, well, that's going to just bog down, and we're going to get nothing but negative responses from your sales teams. So how do we build a training? How do we craft this information in such a way that gets what they need in a targeted, specific way, but it also brings in what we need from the pre-sales side to make sure that the leads coming your way are in that closing stage and not in the discovery stage? And the best way to do that, I feel, is bringing together those insights from customers, what they like, what they don't like about your solution and the competitors. What's the value proposition, and how does that change, and how do we relate that into an example or a story that connects with what's important to that customer? We know at the pre-sale space, that's the demonstration side of it. But to do that effectively, that qualification and pre-step before the demo, that's where we need to equip sales, I feel, a little more from what pre-sales knows to do the job well. So that's what I say, leverage that information, use those interactions to deliver training. And really it's understanding of those qualification steps for deals that can promote higher close rates, because the better qualified deals come your way, the more opportunity you have to close it, the more revenue that comes in the door. That's a win-win-win for everybody. The other thing that's there as far as a benefit is connection with the other divisions. Now, I mentioned where we're located right now, how we're positioned in our organization, I feel really is to be that influencer model for the rest of the company. What happens when we start to add value in some of those other areas, if that means, validating a campaign before it goes to market for the marketing team, if it's providing some brainstorming sessions or insights there, you start to develop relationships with those divisions that can add benefits elsewhere. So if it is something of maybe it's alignment to campaigns and you're trying to coordinate, let's say we do more sales-driven webinars that follow those motions from marketing. Well, you got to have that alignment and those connections with those divisions to set that up. So if you're going to have these trainings, can you have some of that insight provided from the marketing division to help make sure what you're producing is on point with what the marketing is delivering to the industry? If it's the product team and talk about roadmaps and what's coming down the road, can we have those previews ready in those sales trainings related to the product, or at least set the stage of what's coming so that we're not trying to find out as things are released and then everybody's rushing to get that information out. Those connections, those relationships with the other divisions, when we offer the benefit of what pre-sales can, I think also has a reciprocal agreement bringing into the value of that sales training side, because then we can leverage those relationships and bring in partners from product to talk through trainings alongside the pre-sales folks. Bring in your product marketing teams when they're talking about the new value proposition related to a product launch. Bring in marketing to then talk about what they plan on doing throughout the year, and everybody's on the same page. Those connections can be really important, and when you're positioned in such a way to benefit them, they're a little bit more likely to then offer that benefit back to you. Lastly, but certainly not least, is going to be the success side of it. How do you define that success? What can we do to then show there was value in these trainings? And one of the things that we've started to look at is, can you compare quota attainment, sales outcomes, to changes with that sales training? And that's one of the things we're starting to dive into. If you want to have successful trainings to benefit the floor, well, if all they do is absorb this training in this preseason environment, and then once you hit selling season, you kick back off and go back to the old habits, nobody wins there, right? It's just all this effort was put into producing this great content for the training. But if you don't have the reinforcement from your sales leadership team, if you don't have check-ins, if you don't have year-long learning approaches to things, you can have that kind of fire hose approach and then back to normal for the rest of the year. And that's one of the other things that's been really nice with our structure and how we've got product trainer in place to kind of project manage this year-long learning, so that we can do this preseason training and then have a mid-year check-in. Make sure that you're taking that content and say, okay, now that you've learned this from preseason, now that you spent some time with customers, let's revisit all this. Let's make it real now. Let's connect the dots to where you've had some real life interactions with customers. What didn't connect? What did connect? What can we learn from and use better? And how can you now take this big picture concept and put it to life the rest of the season? Those check-ins are important. And again, when you have a leadership team, thankfully, like we have, that has said, we're going to approach this from a year-long learning standpoint. We're going to go down the road of certification and make sure that people are certified in what they sell. That's great reinforcement during this process. So in order to do that, though, you still have to find a way to connect the dots on the reporting standpoint. So it's making sure that you have those same relationships with your sales ops teams to know what quota attainment was before you adopt a new process of training like we did. Okay, benefits, that's what we've observed up to this point. I really think that we're continuing to iterate. Learned this last year that was different from the year before, and we keep trying to change things up. It has been a great experience for us. Before I jump next, who knows what this is? I'm going to date myself a little bit here. Anybody know this game? It's not Frogger. It is Pitfall. Yeah, I know. I kind of teased myself there with the potential pitfalls there. Yeah, this was 1982. It turned 41 years old on April 20th. That's I remember playing this on my aunt and uncle's Intellivision. Atari and television back in the day. This is oh, so fantastic. One of my favorite things to play. But yeah, so the pitfalls that we ran into are things to be aware of, mind you. When you talk about the obstacles that come into having pre-sales involved there, if there aren't certain circumstances in place, you might not have all sunshine and rainbows positioning the pre-sales team as the one to do the training for sales. First and foremost is that sales skills component. We revisited this in our preseason, our internal preseason for solutions consulting this year, and kind of went to the heart of like, what's that sales process look like? What do we do for sales acumen and understand what do they do? We have to have a little bit of empathy for that process, but then the things that they're supposed to be doing in terms of closing techniques and overcoming objections, there's some mindfulness that has to happen from the pre-sales space and awareness of that when you're talking about training for sales. Because if you just go straight on product, but you don't connect it to the things that are important to them, and pick your methodology. If it's spin selling, if it's there's a whole host of things that are out there. Of course, I blank on them because we don't do them all that often. We just went through consultative selling. You've got a ton of different options that exist in the marketplace on this. But if you don't tie those components of methodology, those sales skills, into what you're trying to train on, it makes it hard because you're making the assumption that those sales representatives who've gone through all these trainings on sales skills are going to be able to connect the dots between your product level training and then those sales skills. So embedding that is important. And if it doesn't, if you don't have that connected, that can be a challenge. You always want to make sure that you're having as much connection of their process and how they're going to go about interacting with customers, what we then deliver from a sales training standpoint on product, and those things have to connect in order for that to be effective. I did mention a power dynamic here too. And many of you have expressed over years past that there is an element of they just do the demos, right? The pre-sales team is just the demo team. And if there is that dynamic that, sales runs everything and pre-sales is subservient to that sales organization, which truth be told, that's the way that it felt for several years when I took the team over until we reestablished that partnership and really came at it from a paired approach to all the deals. That power dynamic can really cause a problem because if sales is thought of as the king and the pre-sales team is thought of as, the subservient piece, well, how can you have that person then step into a training environment and a level of knowledge above the sales organization? It won't have the adoption that otherwise could be a benefit. And it does kind of piggyback on the trust comment. So it may be the power dynamic, it may be they just don't have the respect, but trust is a little different. When you talk about, again, when I was in the pro services space, so we were part of that training consulting division, supporting sales primarily, it was very much us versus them. There was a lot of it that you lost this demo, so my deal didn't close. And when you have that lack of trust that everybody is in this for the betterment of the customer, and again, this is a side note, right? I always look at the customers of the pre-sales team as twofold. One being your clients you're trying to service, the prospects you're working on, and the sales division. Your sales counterparts are also your customer in this regard. So that trust has to exist that the customer is at the heart of what we do. If that's not present and the sales team doesn't believe or doesn't trust that you're out there for the betterment of their deal, they're not going to absorb what that training is going to be either. So if you have to then focus on this, there's a quote that I had set aside there too, like from Stephen Covey's Speed of Trust. You have to make sure that you align on your motive. Motive is your reason for doing something, inspires the greatest trust when it shows genuine concern for people, purpose, and society as a whole. Well, if the pre-sales team, and then by way of the sales leadership team, if there's alignment there to understand that the motive of that pre-sales team is to support sales and promote closing sales, helping everybody succeed, and making sure that the customer, our prospect, is also going to get the best service, everybody should be in alignment there, and there should be a little bit more trust. How it's not there, big pitfall, big challenge that can be there. And the last piece is adoption. I mentioned sales leadership earlier, but this has been a critical piece in order for, in my opinion, any bit of sales training to be successful. No matter what you put forth and the effort that goes into building out trainings, even if it's what the sales team has asked for, if you don't have some level of questioning, knowledge check, quizzing, whatever you want to use for your process there. There has to be a learning, there has to be a check, and then there has to have that level of reinforcement from the sales teams for this to stick. Because if you have that process where they don't follow through, they don't get certified, and nothing else happens, you don't have any teeth. There's nothing to hold it accountable to it. And then that same level of sales training goes back to not being effective. Everybody's got to be in that adoption stage. The sales leadership has to make sure that they hold people accountable to the learnings that are put forth. If that doesn't happen, like I said, we're just going to let things fall as they may. So beware of some of those pitfalls. I think that it is inherent to have a lot of these things in place. If you're not at a spot where you have that partnership, that trust with the sales organization, taking and dipping your toe in the training world is probably not the best step right now. I think there's take a step back and look at how can we strengthen some of these things? How can we build that partnership and knock down some of these barriers in order to step forward and position yourself in that training environment? And I mentioned earlier too, right? In order for any training to be effective, it has to be an evolution. You have to know, as the industry changes, you have to adopt a new training process. As you have your products that start to update and shift, you have new user interfaces, you have new features, you have new products that you absorb, right? Or new programs that are released. All that stuff you have to bake into this training. So it does turn into its own role. And I was really thankful to have the opportunity to pull in a product trainer to really project manage this for our organization, because without that central point, if it's me as a pre-sales leader that's got a team to try and support and focus on all these things, and then subsequently do the training piece in tandem, there's not enough hours in the day. So, to dedicate someone to evolving that space, it has been a huge benefit. And a shout out to Julie Whitman. She's my product trainer. She's been overhauling our entire process there. It has been a pleasure to see what she's been able to do with this. She's got a brilliant learning mindset, and we wouldn't be where we are without her at the point of that. But the great thing is she leverages the rest of the solution consultants in that too. She doesn't take on every training herself and deliver it all. She leverages the resources of those solutions consultants that act as an SME. And in order for that to be there, you've got to have that evolution mindset. You've got to say, like, what did we do? What was successful? What can we change? What can we do differently? How can we make it better? And, hearkening back to where the benefits of this industry and how people are always looking to help others. And I really do think that's why we attract the best people. I think at its heart, pre-sales is trying to help. We want to help the customer. We want to help the sales division. We want to help the marketing team. We want to help the product marketing team, the product teams. We want to help. Based on what we know, we can have an influence there and help others. That has led to that pre-sales team being involved in these trainings, which then has elevated their trust and partnership with the sales organization at the same time. So it is really great. And I mean, to go into it thinking you're going to have it perfect the first time around, I mean, maybe if you're Peter or John Kerr, one of the titans of the industry, and they've got it down pat, you're going to have to look at this as a cycle and review things that worked and look at things that didn't. And there's a ton of reporting that goes into it. Who went through all the trainings, who actually got their certifications, what does their attainment of quota look like versus somebody who did half the time or none of the time. There's a lot that comes into this. So you have to be in that mindset that it is an evolution and you have to adjust over time. All right, before I get to questions, I'll give a quick summary, right? I do think that based on what pre-sales brings to the table, all those areas I mentioned of where we have an influence, those insights can really supercharge your sales training outcomes, right? Get to that shake and bake partnership. Make sure that you've got that alignment with your sales organization so there's trust in place, and then you can really have some great things happen where then instead of going to an SME in the product space, they're going to turn. The sales division turns then to those pre-sales folks. They establish those relationships. They have better connections. They can get questions answered faster. You have a lot better connections that can come out of it. You have to have that partnership in place. It's necessary for anything that is pre-sales led training to be successful. Without that partnership, it's going to fall apart. And the trust, the lack of trust, you want to be careful of that from a pitfall standpoint. Losing out on trust with the sales organization can lead to several down steps, but especially in a training relationship, you don't want to have that play against you, because if it's about adoption, if it's about showing improvement, it's about metrics that are going to be outcomes of this effort to do training from the pre-sales space, the trust has got to be there. Otherwise, you won't be able to connect on all the dots there. All right. There's the shake and bake. Thanks, Jacob. Perfect. All right. So I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions, make sure that we did have some space for Q&A. We'll check here on the side. Looks like one from Scott. Hear more about establishing product trainer role, how it becomes a must. They said the product team, sales enablement team. Yeah, okay. So this is an interesting one too, because we were starting to be involved a little bit more so in the preseason training in our environment. And at the time, sales enablement was really that key space to deliver on these product trainings. And what happened was when that sales enablement division went to, we'll say, a level above, they wanted to take the product pieces away and focus more on the skills and the methodology. It fell to the divisions to take on some of those product level trainings. And ultimately, with the complexity of the solutions that we had in our space, we were able to absorb a headcount from that sales enablement team and keep it directly under our pre-sales space. The job responsibility is still evolving. Like I said, today it's more of a project manager role. Julie was a solutions consultant prior to that. We had hired her in. She was a teacher before that, which really lends itself well. I always try and give a plug. Any pre-sales leaders who are looking for the best type of folks to join into a pre-sales organization, teachers, they're underappreciated, they're underpaid, and they're lifelong learners. They blend themselves really, really well in the pre-sales space. And I was lucky enough that Julie was interested in that. So then she took on this role. And because of the number of products and the complexity that we have, there was never an expectation that she delivered everything. It was going to be, kind of storyboarding it, structuring it, and then leveraging relationships with the rest of the solutions consultants or marketing or product marketing or any of those other divisions to come in and build and deliver that training. So yeah, that job responsibility, like I said, it continues to grow because now it's turned into, we've got the certification that plays in this house. And now they're going through not only, building up the content, but coordinating with sales enablement. They have, we use our MindTickle platform for a lot of the tracking mechanism and the quizzing functions. But it's kind of acting as that project manager to bring it all together. I know there were several questions in that one question, so I'm trying to look back and see that I didn't miss anything. Do they train just SEs and then SEs train the rep? So the sales engineers actually play a bigger role in delivering to the account executives. So our training that we built for our preseason this year, the certifications, and then the ongoing training throughout the year, it's designed for the account executives, so the sales reps themselves. More times than not, it is the solutions consultants, the pre-sales folks who are delivering that content, but it is designed mostly for the sales org. There are plenty of times where we say, join in if it's somebody who's cross-training or learning other solutions. Obviously, they can learn from their peers. That's a great opportunity for SEs to jump in there too. But the account executives are the main beneficiaries of that content. The question around setting up internal certification, achievement requirements, we're building it kind of as we go. I do not love the analogy of building the plane as we're flying it, but it's kind of a necessity in the space that we're in. And I think this year was a huge learning experience. We had better analytics. We had a new platform to deliver from. So there's a lot that we're learning and building on that as well. All right.
We have another question from Peter.
Go for
it. So how often are seasoned pre-sales teams having to train newly minted salespeople, and are there best practices for this?
It is a great question too. And I think it's one of those, we've struggled a little bit because we've got a global onboarding program that our enablement team delivers, but it was built based on a lot of the content that the pre-sales team provided to them. So it's a very high level design for like SDRs. Every new hire goes through that global onboarding. And then what we're in the process of developing right now is kind of the level 2. So that next step of transitioning from an SDR into an account executive motion, so that you've got a little deeper product, a little more focus on discovery, more so than just the light version that comes in from a new hire. I also have one of my sales coaches that is primarily tied to SDRs and new hires. So it's reinforcement of that same concept of come in, understand everything. There's a lot that comes at them as far as sales skills and how to use our solutions and our process, or internal processes, and then take that into the SDR motion. Well, then you're going to have people that want to naturally learn and gravitate toward that next level. That's the content we're starting to build and formalize right now, so that there is that next step into what else do you need to know to move into that selling motion, which realistically will leverage a lot of what we had in our preseason content, and then kind of build it with that in mind. So we're not recreating the wheel. Best practices, I think the more that you can have the cyclical nature of it, where those same resources they're going to turn to as an account executive to deliver on the technical demos on the back end of the sales process. Who better, right? Bring them in and establish those relationships. Let them kind of lead the charge on understanding what's important to convey to a customer from the value perspective, and then bring that to the table.
Next up, we have how do you manage training for? How do you manage training for new sales team members in a timely manner without them feeling like they're drinking water from a fire hose? I love that phrase, by the way. I just recently heard that the first time in my life, and it keeps coming up. AKA combating information overload.
Yeah, it is. I think anytime that you've got that wide berth of products and solutions, like I mentioned, that we run into, there is innately going to be that fire hose approach, right? You have to have a little bit of everything. When it's coming from all directions, our specific example, we've got a tax workflow, an audit workflow, firm management, advisory. Like there's all these workflows that encompass multiple solutions. So I think at the core of it, if you can break it down to understand what is the business trying to achieve and how your solutions solve problems in that workflow, that's step one, right? And that's the foundation you build upon. You go into the specifics on the programs, you're going to give, the historical approach of like top 3 features and this, that, and the other. At a first glance, you give the minimum as best you can. But then I feel what we're starting to transition in the sales enablement team is doing this as well. After a window of time, and define that window of how much time they have for their learning time frame, what do they have for ramped quota, wherever it is, but figure out your window to come back to it after they've had time to talk to customers. New hires especially, it is a challenge from a learning environment because they may be coming into your space unfamiliar with the market and the industry you support. And if that's the case, they're taking in everything and they have no context of what these customers are going to bring to the table. So once you've established at least that baseline foundation and they have some time spent with customers, revisit the topics that you've already covered, and you'll have a whole new level of light bulb moments that hit those reps. The frequency is really going to be contingent on the length of your ramp time, or rather, the length of your onboarding time and the length of your ramped quota, if indeed you have a ramped quota.
Alrighty, next up we have, do you ever face challenges with balancing schedules for internal trainings versus external client demos?
Yes. Now, we do get lucky with where we've positioned our training in the tax world, just because that tax season where most of the accountants and CPAs that we're working with are in the midst of their busiest time of the year, that January to April. We have a lessened volume of demos that we deliver during that time frame. So it's a benefit in that regard. What we are going to face this year, though, as we're doing this year-long approach to it, lifelong. Yeah, it is lifelong. This year-long approach to it is going to be, how do we segment that time? Because we do have a pretty deep bench for a lot of our stuff. We've got 4 main channels, like I said, that we support. And I've got somewhere between 8 and 10 solution consultants per channel. So we've got the volume to absorb kind of that busy season. As we start to wane past August and things start to slow down a little bit, we're going to play with that and see how much of an impact it's going to have. But I do envision that's going to be, there's times where content creation and delivery, what's going to trump it? Is it the client experience and delivering a demo to close a deal? Or is that learning piece going to play a key factor? And we're going to have to balance that. So I do see that being something that Julie and I will probably have a lot of discussions around moving forward.
How rigorous is your demo certification, and do people fail out of the training?
Great question. Yeah, so I will say I'm very, very thankful. Our general manager in the sales division for our group basically came to the table with the sales leadership team and said, they don't get certified, they're not getting paid on their deal. And without that level of, outcome and holding them to a standard of they have to complete this or else they're not able to get their quota attainment. That really pushed people to I hope, drive adoption and pay attention when these trainings are taking place. The rigorous nature. So we wanted to make sure, I've got a manager that reports to me in the tax group. He put together his certification, and what we did was certify the managers first. Once those managers were certified, then they took that and subsequently did the role play certifications for their teams. I can't say for certain if there was any bias from those managers and their teams and what they were being certified on, but we did hold the managers to a standard. And if they didn't pass, they had to go back and do it again. And we wanted to make really clear that in order for the managers to best support their teams, they had to be that point of reference. They had to be that knowledge resource that the team can turn to. Certainly the solution consultants are there to back them up, but as a leader of the sales org, as their, the person that their team is going to come to, we wanted them to be, first in that certification track. So we did hold them to a pretty high standard. Absolutely.
That kind of flows into the next question. Do you have any experiences with mentor programs?
It is a great question, Peter, too, because I think one of the things that we try and balance is learning and coaching. And when I mentioned our coaches are part of that, they kind of act as a mentor, if you will, but they're not in the trenches with the reps. They all came from that sales role, so they can relate to it and they can kind of connect the dots with those reps. But we always look for the folks who are working primarily the best with the pre-sales organization, and those folks are who we recommend they communicate with for kind of that frontline mentorship. What ends up happening, though, we make it very, very clear. You can't just jump into a coaching motion. We are lucky enough to have the reporting where we can go back and say, well, they haven't completed these trainings. We're not going to set them up with a coach. They have to put in some ownership and go through the training that we've produced up to this point before they get into a coaching motion. And those coaches have folks that they lean on and relate as well. So they can pull them in, maybe not in like a formalized mentorship program, but people that they can point to and say, these are other reps who have been successful with partnering with the pre-sales team to get the best outcomes. And they're the ones we want to lean on. But it is, it's another point to dive into further with our training processes. Like, who else can we have? Do we have a bench of those mentors to turn to? Because, every division is going to deal with attrition. You've got new folks coming in all the time, especially in the sales organization. How do we set them up for success? They've got to partner up with somebody. And we want to identify who are those best folks to work with the pre-sales team so they're establishing the best habits. It's a good point.
Absolutely. And I'm loving all of the accountability in every single piece of that. I think that's so important, so imperative. Next question. What could be the most important SE's topics to train to sales teams? Are there any particular?
I think, what we've tried to focus back, and we had lots of conversations on this with the solutions consultant team. And I feel like boiling it down to the workflow that they're trying to achieve in their business, right? And I know I keep pulling back to the tax and accounting realm just because that's where we live. But if there's not a baseline understanding of what workflow they're trying to accomplish, and then how our solutions fit in to solve problems that those customers face in the industry, that's got to be core to what they learn. And I think if I look back to the way we used to train on things, it was product. Here's what the demo sounds like. Here's what competitors do. Go. And I think when we looked at how do we kind of almost turn that on its head and say, well, I don't want to talk about product at all. I want you to understand what is it that the business is trying to accomplish. What does their day-to-day look like? What are the things that they, what are the hurdles that face them? And then how can what we're trying to position as a solution for them, how does that play into that? And if we can get them to at least understand the product at a high level where it fits into the problem statements and in their workflow, that's the most basic thing. And if you think about like where pre-sales is going to deliver in a demo, well, for us, that's the critical piece. We've got to know what's important to them so that we cater the message of the demonstration specific to that need. And we're showing that all of the value that solution is going to bring reinforces that problem is going to be solved. They're going to be more efficient. They're going to save time doing whatever. They're going to be able to hire more staff, whatever their challenge is that they're trying to overcome. We always craft the message of the demo in that way. Well, we need to understand getting sales on the same page to get that kernel, that most important thing, or top three things, right, Peter? the top three things they need to focus on. What are the challenges they face? What are those things they need to overcome? Make sure that's there. And if we can train them on how to do that better, then the demos can connect better to those customers and the outcomes will be higher overall. I don't think a demo does it justice. And I think I can't quite tell if that was the end of the question you're throwing in there. A demo doesn't quite do it because that's just the connection pieces. And what we do, and definitely how we leverage Consensus, which again, side note, great additional sales training tool. When you have a nice library in Consensus, you can go view that at any point, give themselves a nice refresher on key points before they talk to a customer. It's a great additional tool in your bag when you're talking about training sales. But I don't think that demo is enough when you talk about connecting dots with that greater workflow. It is just talking about those high-level features and what that solves. It may not be in direct relation to that customer, so you got to figure out a way to get a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. I
Awesome.
think that was the last of our Q&A.
Cool. Well,
so yeah,
I will.
Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, my last thing too, just by all means, I appreciate everybody taking time out of their day. I know it's been a lot of sessions going on so far. If you took the time to come and join me, thank you very much. I'm greatly appreciative of it. Find me on LinkedIn. I mentioned earlier that I attribute a lot of the things that I was able to take and put into place in my organization through talking with folks in the pre-sales space. You've got some great people who've already been on stage so far. I know we're going to hear from Todd Jansen in a little bit. That was one of the things, and I've reached out to him. I've talked to Peter before. I've had Don Carmichael and Adam Freeman and all these folks in the space, and have had relationships that are there that's helped to set the stage for how I was able to build this team and be successful. Find me on LinkedIn, and if there's anything, in just the same way that Consensus is looking to give back by providing its entire platform and conference like this, free of charge. If there's anything I can do to help anybody, find me on LinkedIn, give me an email. I'm more than happy to do the same. Special kudos to Consensus, Garen, the whole team, and what they're able to produce. The content continues to get better and better every year. The product continues to be enhanced. Like, I can't thank them enough for all that they've done for me and for our sales organization. It really has changed the way we do business.
That's awesome, Tony. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was really wonderful. So we're just about wrapping up here. Tony, if we could switch sharing screens for a sec.
Go for it.
Okie dokes. So we just want to remind everyone about our DEMOFEST game, where each session that you attend and each session feedback survey that you fill out is going to get you points to win some of our really cool prizes. And we're really excited to be bringing DEMOFEST on the road again as DEMOFEST X. So we had a great time in San Francisco in March, and we can't wait to bring the event to Dublin, London, and New York City later this year. You can register to join us at any of those events at demofest.com, which is also at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. Of course, we encourage you to stop by our expo hall to visit our premier partners of DEMOFEST. Remember, like Tony had mentioned, there's no transfer of money involved in this event. So all of our partners here have really gone above and beyond to contribute to making this event as successful as it has been for all of you. So thank you all for joining us for Should Pre-Sales Train Sales, Positives and Potential Pitfalls. And thank you to Tony for that valuable insight and knowledge. Up on the screen are the upcoming sessions that you're automatically going to be pushed to the next session in your track. And you can switch tracks or sessions by toggling to the agenda tab at the top left of your screen. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.